Thank you. Magyanatimirandasya Jnanam Janashalakaya Chakcharanmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Nama Shrishtam Manumapi Satriputram Atrasharupam Rupam Tasyagrajamarupurim Mathurim Goshtavatim Radha Kundam Girivaram Maho Radhikamadhavasam Prapto Yasya Pratita Kripaya Shri Gurum Tam Natosmi Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyaiva Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Nikhila Shruti Mole Ratnamala Diti Nirajita Padapankajanta Aji Mukta Kulairupasyamanam Paritashvam Harinam Samshrayami Anarapitacharim Thirat Karunayavatirna Kalahu Samarpaitamannatachvalarasam Svabhakti Shriyam Hari Purata Sundara Dyuti Kadamba Sandipita Sada Hridaye Khandaresh Purato Vasachinandana Janulambita Bujjo Kanakavadato Sankirtanaika Pitaro Kamalaya Takshu Vishwambharo Duyavaro Jugadharmapalo Vande Jagatpriyakaro Karunavataru Ladini Shakti Swarupaya Gauranga Hridaya Cha Bhakta Shakti Pradhanaya Gadadhara Namastute He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesh Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastute Radhe Vrindavanadhi Karunamrita Vahine Kripaya Nij Padabja Dasyanmayam Pradiyatam Bhaktya Vihinaya Aparadha Lakshay Shiptashtakamaदितरङ्गमाध्ये Kripamaitvam Sharanam Prapanam Vrindenmaste Charanarvindam Vrindenmaste Charanarvindam Shri Shri Gaudiya Vaishnavism Guru Parampara Ki Jai Shri Harinam Prabhu Ki Jai Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Ki Jai Shri Shri Radhaman Mohan Radha Govinda Dev Radha Gopinath Ji Ki Jai Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Gaur Premanand Hari Bol. So, good morning to all of you. Dandapad. And some morning gathering was organized today. I was thinking if we are okay, we can do Ishtagosti, which basically means questions and answers, Q&A, as I like to put it, Q&E, quest and explorations, since one says there's never a definitive answer to any topic, you can always say something more about it. That's the nature of talking about the infinite. No? One name for Bhagavan in the scriptures is Ananta, which means infinite, without end. And to talk about Ananta is in itself Ananta, right? That's why Uddhava said in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Ananta Kata Rasasyam. No? Ananta Kata. Another word for Krishna Kata, Hari Kata is Ananta Kata, which means to talk about the infinite or to talk infinitely, no? Endlessly about He who has no end. And so that's our, that may be our bewildering and our hope at the same time. We can be endlessly talking about He who has no end, and we will be nicely engaged for eternity. So that's our hope, at least in Bhakti, in the Bhakti tradition. That's our hope, and that's our immediate relish. That is, oh, I'm already doing what I want to do for eternity. No, my eternal prospect is non different from whatever I happen to be doing on a daily basis here and now. So it's not now that I'm doing now something that is relatively uncomfortable and I don't like it that much, but I will do it so someday I can get to that place where I can really do what I like. That's not our mentality. Mortality is, I'm already doing what I will be doing in eternity. So there's reason to celebrate, right? So anyhow, this Istragosti dynamics is always back and forth, is reciprocal, and questions naturally, how to say, questions already include the inspiration for an answer. Many times I'm officially here the guy with the camera in front and the one who will be opening his mouth and giving the answers. But many times your questions or your contributions or your sincere inquiry in itself will be the main part of the equation sometimes, or will inspire me to say things that I will never say otherwise. I always recall when Srila Bhakti-Rakshaksidhar Goswami Maharaj was in the 80s and receiving many of the disciples of Srila Prabhupada who went to him after Srila Prabhupada's passing from this world to ask for different forms of guidance. And they will come with very unique questions according to their particular situation and very sincere inquiry, very sincere longing to go deeper and how to serve their Gurudev and so on. And Srila Siddhar Maharaj will give incredible answers. And once Srila Siddhar Maharaj's secretary or personal servant, eventual successor Bhakti Sundar Govinda Maharaj, he will tell the disciples of Srila Prabhupada, I've been with my Guru Maharaj in all of his lectures, and I never saw him saying the things that he's saying to you. And that's because of your sincerity, he said. You're coming with such sincerity of inquiry that's drawing from him new gems that were even new for him, so to say. So why I'm saying all this, just to make it clear, this is a 50% teamwork, right? Don't expect here this is a one man show performance and the Swami will do all the magic. We are all in this together. So your doubts or questions or topics you may like to hear more about are essential part of the contribution, and I will just try to honor that inquiry and follow accordingly, basically, right? So that's it. Are there any questions or topics or things you may like to share in any direction? You can ask whatever you want. No filters. Unfiltered. Istagoste. Can be a question, it can be a topic that you may like to explore further. Remember, any topic can be explored endlessly. Yes, Prem Kishore, right? Yes.
Let's see if I can formulate a question. So easily.
First question. Oh, it's okay. We need some nice soundtrack. So it's good. Yes.
So I guess it's more of a topic. It's related to our tradition having a lot of information about Krishna.
Information,
like
yes.
We know.
Yes.
We get told so much about how he looks and what he's
we know the name of his earrings.
So many things, exactly.
Yeah.
So much detail. And then taking from some of the readings I've done with Christian saints in literature, there's less detail, but there's still this really deep realization of God, of this relationship is very deep, but without detail. So I guess the question is related to sometimes can the detail be a block from an actual real experience of God?
Yeah. Thank you for the question. We were talking yesterday about that on some level in one of our topics with Father Cashin, one of our 16,108 topics. So that was a comprehensive conversation. And I talk about that also in my book on radical personalism. At one point, I go there because I basically address that topic. So for me, the fact that you are asking about it is, of course, is a further validation and confirmation of, not like you're validating what I wrote about, but for me that confirms, okay, there is some natural concern in the zeitgeist, in the different members of our tradition in this direction. Okay, our tradition is ultra specified, specific about who God is, and to be honest, doing some impartial, objective, comparative study among traditions, I have not found any tradition who goes to that level of specificity. And with this, I'm not saying we are better, just in case I'm making my immediate disclaimer. I mean, of course, it feels better to us, and that's why we are Gaudiya Vaishnavas, but it's not that we are trying to take over the world and convince every Christian father and every other person that you should join us because we are more specific than you in this and this. Because as you say, in other directions or aspects, sometimes we find more specificity of detailed experience we can find in other traditions as well. So many things can happen. So ours is a very detailed tradition. I agree. As I was telling, we know the name of God's earrings or of Radha's uncle bells. I mean, all that is described in detail, right? So, and there, I will say, I'm not saying that's bad in itself. Of course not. It's meant to nourish a particular flavor and mood of devotion and sense of relationality. But I agree that it can get in the way, and we can. In some case, I've seen that. I've seen that in myself. You can get lost in details or lost in the information. It's information. It's not false information. We will say it's revealed knowledge, but until and unless I know what to do with that, still information. Information. No, still I'm not fully formed. I'm information. So information, it's great, it's knowledge, but if it's not integrated and processed and digested and expressed in a healthy way, we can just develop a superiority complex just by having more detailed information than other groups. And I'm just coming to you to, do you know which god's earrings are like, or what's their name in your tradition? Oh, you didn't even know that God had earrings. We know that. Yeah, but okay, what you are doing with that? What are you doing with God's earrings names? How you are processing that into a realization? It's making you more humble, more broad, more appreciative, more inclusive, or it just becoming making you sectarian and exclusive? So potentially there is a danger. And again, it's not that intrinsically is dangerous, but potentially every aspect of any spiritual tradition is dangerous. Not because the tradition is dangerous, because we are dangerous. And if we are not properly mature, we can even take the sacred, the most sacred, and make a war out of it. So we have that capacity. We have such potential to go in any direction. So for me, a way to how to say, to be sobered and humble in that direction, that all we don't get lost in all those details, but we understand the details for what they are, is first to have a very strong foundation that of the commonality that exists across traditions, for example. First, instead of first jumping into what makes my tradition uniquely specific and different from everyone, we are if we do that, we are starting with a difference or differentiated pattern instead of what makes us one, what makes us common, what makes us united with a common center, with a common basis, with a common God. Let's first establish that foundation deeply, not just quickly like, oh yeah, God is one, we are all worshiping God. And my tradition, by the way, no, no, let's spend enough time to lay down the bedrock for our temple in the heart, a bedrock of inclusiveness and commonality. Uh, and that's in the scripture. It's not my own saying. I mean, you have in the Bhagavatam. again, one of the main verses of the whole Srimad Bhagavatam, that Jiva Goswami takes it and makes the whole Shandarbha out of it. A sixfold treatise out of one verse. Vadanti tat tattva vidas tattvam jnanadvayam brahmeti paramatmeti bhagavaniti shabdyate. Bhagavatam is saying the seers of truth, the tattva beats, those who see the reality. Tattva means reality, beat means seer. So the seers of reality have described that reality is advaigyan tattva. Tattva means reality, advaigya means non-dual consciousness. I'm quoting Srimad Bhagavatam. So reality is non-dual consciousness. It's non-dual and it's conscious. You cannot just separate and fragment it and make it dual. It's non-dual, it's united. And it is known as Brahman, Paramatman, Bhagavan. Then it has different aspects, as we refer. But the Bhagavatam begins with non-dual. It's one. Reality is one, and there is a variety of expressions of that reality. So different traditions will relate to that ultimate reality from different angles, but the reality is one. So I think we need to spend enough time to be properly grounded, and not only in knowledge but in realization, properly grounded in how reality is one and it's expressed in different ways. This is famous verse from the Rig Veda, says ekam sat vipram bahuda vadanti. The same thing. The Vipras, or the sages, will describe reality as ekam, as one, but bahuda vadanti. At the same time, approach from different angles and describe differently because of that. So, and on that foundation, I will say that yes, I also experienced what you mentioned, Prem Kishore, that sometimes we can get like an overdose. Having so much knowledge and having so much details can take us to a place of toxic certainty, toxic certitude. We know so much about God. Nobody has the details that we have. Nobody speaks about God's earrings. Again, sorry for the earring example. We can go in so many other and just no? So we can develop again a superiority complex, a toxic sense of certitude. Like we know everything, so we don't need to go further. It's it. We have been given everything, and we enter into a place of complacency, into a comfort zone, and we don't go very deep into our own practice. Is you follow? And in other traditions, I will say like Christianity, sometimes they may not be having the name of God's earrings, but sometimes you see that with whatever information they have, which I wouldn't say it's little, but with whatever they have done so much. And sometimes we may have something more, but instead of doing more equally, we just like become complacent in the overdose of information we are receiving. You follow my point? Of course, that's not the intention of those details in our tradition, that you just relax and develop superiority complex, become sectarian, exclusivistic, don't go deeper. No. So for me, it's very inspiring every time I meet Christian practitioners, genuine, deep Christian practitioners, and how deep they go. Even with one line, with one word, or especially even how, and that's a whole other conversation, but how comfortable they are many times with not knowing certain things. Right? We may say, oh, we have the answer to the, and they may say, oh, we don't know about that. And we are okay with coexisting with mystery. And it's like, whoops, I missed that lesson. I missed that lesson, and every time something becomes unknown, unknowable, mysterious, I start to get unsettled, uncomfortable, and I want the answer quickly, the information, the certainty. But that makes my faith journey lose nuance. No? Because the faith journey is to be nuanced by what's not fully known. And that's also in our tradition. It's not that we are not talking about that. Prem in the Bhagavatam is called Rahasya, topmost secret. Krishna is called Ganashyam, the dark cloud. That's mysterious. He's mysterious. There are many statements in the scripture. Krishna himself said, the Vedas personified say, the glories of God are endless, therefore he himself doesn't know the limit of them. So he's a mystery to himself. Who are we to say, Krishna, you don't know all the limits of your... I have all the answers. Come to me. No. We should also have some humility, and instead of like, it's a great temptation, and I'm saying for myself to accumulate knowledge. I'm not against knowledge. I love knowledge, those who know me, but it's a temptation also to just overindulge in information, so to say. Like if that's replacing the inner journey, like if that's replacing the faith journey that requires moments of doubt, uncertainty, mystery, surrender, faith. I don't know what's going on, but I trust it, right? I don't know where this is going, but I trust the unfolding of the journey. How much we have that courage, that willingness. So, and information. Sometimes we can use information just to cope with all that. When we have to really expose ourselves to surrender and being willing to coexist with mystery, bring more information, so everything becomes more certain. Certain means controllable. And controllable, another word for that in Sanskrit is Maya. That which can be measured. Measured for what? For control. So knowledge, I'm not against knowledge. Again, I'm those who know me, I like knowledge. It seems so important. But as important as it is, knowledge has to take us to a practical expression of that. You have to digest knowledge also. You have to process it. So yeah, I agree. There is some good reason to give a warning to all the ultra specific details of our tradition, and not that they are in themselves bad, but be careful not to rush into them that quickly without a proper foundation, because that can be spiritual bypassing. And I know many devotees like to run into the most esoteric details of the tradition, but then you see how they relate to one another, and it's like you miss class one of the whole course, like how to be a human, basic human, in how to talk to one another, think of one another, still full of judgment. Again, I'm not saying I'm totally free from that, so I'm go first in the line when I'm giving all these examples. So yeah, for me it's a very humbling and sobering experience to expose myself to practitioners of other traditions, and 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 appreciate the realizations, as different as we may be. That doesn't mean I cannot appreciate how they practice and how they strive to go deeper with the revelation they have. And it's like it always reflects back to, okay, and what I'm doing with my revelation, so to say. There's this in the Srimad Bhagavatam, there are many times, if you do a search, many verses in the Bhagavatam that said tavan eva, which means, how to say in English, like uh, up to this, or like this is enough, this is enough to be said. So a verse is saying, and the etaban eva, like this is enough to be understood. Like don't try to, okay, next verse, next. Take this and do something with that. I think that's important. Or like, as Srila Siddhar Maharaj will say, let's talk deeply about basic topics instead of let's talk about high topics in a superficial way. Right? That's another way of putting it. Because again, we have such high esoteric topics in our tradition, so it's a temptation to go there and feel, okay, I'm in the highest, the club of the highest. I'm in the elite, the VIP, esoteric VIP. But you can end up talking about the highest thing in the most superficial way, and that's very disgusting, I would say. Why don't you go to the most basic theme and explore it as deeply as you can? That warranties that you will be able to go to other topics with integrity, No? And you will be given entrance into those higher realms. The guardians of those higher realms will see, okay, you are trustworthy. No, you're not coming here just to plunder everything superficially. You have shown that you're honoring from the basic thing, from the most basic thing up to with you have honored that with integrity. So yeah.
So the difference between Gan and Vigan. The one may have some Gan, but if there's no Vigan and no realization, even of the most basic things, and there's no point filling your head with so much Gan if you haven't had some realization of the basic understanding of who Krishna is, what our relationship with Krishna is, how he is. He is unlimited, and he is ultimately unknowable in many cases, many ways. But, so we have to have some real. Prabhupada said also, he said that if you just speak from a basic point of realization, a little Saraswati, a little girl, she was, Prabhupada said, who is God? Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. There's a little girl. And Prabhupada said she's speaking from her heart. Therefore, there is potency there. So if you speak from your level of realization, then potency will be there. But if you try and jump speaking on something that you may have some yarn, you may have read some book, or you may have some external knowledge about that thing, but if you have no realization, then there's no potency. No potency. So Prabhupada was warning about that.
I appreciate your point, Manmal Prabhu, of speaking from the heart, because we want to touch people's heart when sharing. If I speak from my head, I may touch your head. No, I may fascinate you intellectually, and you're like, whoa, but not necessarily there's a transformation. Again, there's information. Transformation is another thing. Transformation, information, to make a play of words. Yeah. And again, that's a sign of honesty and of humility. Like, only speak about the things that you have some realization of. Of course, there's no end to how much realization you can have on any given topic, but let's not try to speak from a place of trying to impress other people, for example, because sometimes that can happen. This can become a platform for impressing others, and the real question is why at all you need to impress people. What's behind that need to impress others? That means basically you're trying to show yourself for who you are not. I need you to think that I'm more than what I actually am. So that goes back to, well, maybe you have a problem in how you relate to yourself, how you see yourself. Anyhow, I don't know if that helps, Ram Kishore. You have any further thoughts? Does it make sense?
Yeah, probably do, but I guess, practically speaking, maybe, is it possible to sort of share something from your own journey into other experiences with other traditions and how you found that? Just trying to think of how to word it. I was thinking the other day, like, is it something to do with maybe the language used, or me being in a Western body, growing up in a certain culture, and then finding traditions that are coming from this type of culture as opposed to the tradition that we're following, having a different way of speaking or presenting things. And sometimes it feels like this cultural presentation from a Western perspective goes straight into the heart. I don't know if that makes sense.
It does. Yeah, language is a big area of conversation, right? Language basically frames experience. No? I mean, we have a certain experience also in big part depending on the language we are using. So language shapes, frames, creates a certain experience. I can tell you one thing in one language and the same thing using another words, and one will traumatize you and the other one heal you from the previous trauma I created, so to say. So and sometimes that can happen. In my case, that has happened, since you are asking for personal testimony. A few years ago, for example, I was going through a considerable intense existential crisis due to some circumstances in my life that some of you may already know because they became public. So recalibrating, like, okay, who am I as a Gaudiya Vaishnava? I mean, the crisis was not should I be a Gaudiya Vaishnava, like how to continue being a Gaudiya Vaishnava in a way that is relevant and relatable to me, you know? and so on and so forth. And I couldn't relate to some ways in which the tradition was being represented. I didn't have a problem with the substance of the tradition, but the presentation of it in certain places or circles or languages. And I always love to go through other traditions, and this was before meeting Gaudiya Vaishnavism, and it continued till today, so it's nothing new for me. But I went considerably deeper than before into mystical Christianity and the study of different ancient and contemporary authors. And in many ways, I was rediscovering my own tradition through through those writings. And big part of the rediscovery happened just because of a different language being used. So that particular language kind of sent me back to my tradition, so to say. And like, oh, that's here also in the Bhagavatam. And this is here. Of course, there's different words, but they're talking about the same thing. No? So sometimes we need a different word. It doesn't mean that we are downplaying our tradition at all. It's just that we are finding our tradition express again. What does it mean? Our tradition. How thick is the wall we can establish between my tradition and their tradition? When there's so much in common that, again, the wall starts to soften and to become less and less thick, and at one point you realize in one sense there is no wall from the highest level of realization. They're just different flavors of love. Let's put it that way. So yeah, words are, I will make, and we have made many conversations in that connection, like words can really change your experience, huh? And of course, in one sense, you are speaking about Western traditions. Technically speaking, Christianity is not a Western tradition, right? Okay. Christianity originates in the East also, right? I remember last year I was visiting Father Richard Rohr and some of the, and in a retreat that they had with their group, and I was introduced by, not introduced, but at one point referred to by one of the speakers, like, oh, here we have our Eastern brother with us. And I appreciated it, but at the same time I thought, but Christianity is also Eastern. in origin, in source. But of course, it's also seen as a Western tradition. And I'm saying that in the sense of, okay, how it adapted and accommodated, and of course, with all the ups and downs of any adaptation process. But that's how it became, of course, established in many reasons, and remains relevant to many. It's not that it's all presented in the language of the original doctrine, the same cloth and the same this and the same that. So yeah, I'm open that also our tradition, uh, how to say, is presented and conceived, not only presented to the outer people but to ourselves, is in a way that remains relevant for us. So sometimes we need to change words because each of us is a child of a particular culture, so to say, a child of a particular zeitgeist, time of some time, some place, some circumstance. So yeah, sometimes we need to use another word. I don't know. To give you an example, like the Srimad Bhagavatam second verse says, Dharma praito kaitavo. Start saying that. Atra. So in this book, the Bhagavatam say all Dharma praito kaitav. Prajita means like utterly rejecting Dharma kaitav or kaitav Dharma, which could be translated as cheating in the name of religion. All cheating in the name of religion or cheating religion is utterly rejected in this book. Another word we can use to make it a little bit more relatable to modern times is spiritual bypassing. Huh? So, first line of the Bhagavatam basically is, this is not about spiritual bypassing. So don't take the book for that. You follow, just an example. It's the same thing. If you play out the implications of the terms, basically you are saying the same thing, but in a language that for many is like, oh yeah, of course. I resonate with that. cheating in the name of religion for some may be like, and if I bring spiritual bypassing, for many it's like, oh yeah, of course. So yeah, language is important, and that's, I would say, that's the duty of parampara. A succession of teachers and students means to keep the whole tradition relevant and relatable. One aspect is linguistic expression. What's the linguistic uh, expression necessary for this chapter, for this audience, for me? It may not be the same for you, but how to express my own tradition, ultimately in my own language. Not that I'm creating my own tradition, but the tradition, the message, the essence is there, but each of us will resonate with certain words more than others, and there's place to find those words without changing the teaching, but in a way that remains as relevant, as relatable as possible. So yeah. Is it too hot for some? No. Okay.
You all right?
Yeah, it's
You
okay.
can open the door.
I'm talking so I don't risk falling asleep. I'm just asking for those who are comfortably sitting there, and if you want to fall asleep, that's totally fine. No problem. Take your rest. I won't take it personally.
I'd like to ask Maharaj, is there a common practice amongst all the sort of mainstream traditions that make them equally potent?
Is there a common practice in all?
In all the sort of mainstream traditions, if I can call it that,
Uh-huh.
that effectively make them equally potent?
That effectually make them equally potent.
Yeah.
Father Cashin, I invite you to share some words.
The funny thing is, that's my talk tonight.
So let's have a trailer of today's meeting. Sorry.
It seems to me that when we're talking about comparative religions and most importantly comparative spirituality, so what we do in our sadhana, points of unity tend to be found more in the convergence of silence, solitude, stillness, which is why so many people with so many different traditions are hungering for a practice that centers on meditation, how I can still the mind, or at least quiet the mind, and get to a place of a more dedicated and centered love. So, for example, to take Swami's earlier, the question, the quest and exploration that just ensued. One of the examples that was used is a very, very detailed, unique element of the Bhagavatam, which centers on God's earrings, right? That has little relevance to any other tradition, but it might have very, very deep, even if esoteric relevance to everybody in this room, because you could delve that and find something very precious for spiritual practice. At the same time, it would be a hard sell for a Muslim, a Christian, even a Hindu of a different sampradaya to have some appreciation. But you'd have a very difficult time in finding an argument in helping people come to something that is maybe more common and more basic, like stillness, silence, depth, and something that's, for lack of a better term, more contemplative. That doesn't make it better, it just makes it more common. In terms of a potency, I suppose that would also be rather aligned with the personality and the temperament of the person engaging in the sadhana. Some people are very, very content for a meditation practice that might be very, very brief, but for example, in Christianity, being part of the charismatic movement, which is very, very similar to kirtan, in which there's a more extroverted expression of their spiritual life, and that for them will be more potent. Whereas for others, being in a charismatic prayer event or in kirtan might make them feel very uncomfortable because they're more of an introvert by nature and they don't know how to express themselves bodily and vocally. So it's both. It's a both and. Potency is found in what grounds us, first of all, as human persons, even not so much prescinding from, but precedent to our spiritual tradition. And then, who am I in the various spiritual traditions, just again at the level of my humanity, that's going to help that being come to life.
Amen.
Can I add something to that?
Yes.
I've been a member of the Interfaith Council in my town for quite some years, and I've gleaned from a lot of close communication with Christians of different denominations, and a Muslim, and a Baha'i person, and a Quaker, and a Sikh person. Very nice Sangha we have, all these different people representing different faiths who have decided, they've made the conscious heart decision not to judge each other if there are any differences or disagreements in their tenets of their faiths, and to connect with each other as humans, as spiritual seekers, people who all agree that there is something divine which is greater than us. And we connect on that level, and we have some really good, genuine friendships. Very nice. And I've gleaned from this experience that everybody, I'm going to use our terminology, our Gaudiya terminology, everybody has bhakti. Everybody wants to be devoted to God, and every faith promotes devotion to God as its primary tenet. So I thought that would have been my answer to your question.
Thank you. Yeah. Does it help, Push Prabhupada, Prabhu?
Yeah, I think the contemplative
Sure,
aspect.
please.
No, sorry.
Mhm.
The contemplative aspect is that you mentioned is that sort of certainly resonates and makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. And I appreciate also that Father Kasha mentioned silence, and I know, or in connection to contemplation, and I know that probably in our tradition, silence is not that popular because the emphasis is kirtan many times, or japa, or vocalized. So silence maybe even like seen with suspicion or something. But at the same time, that is not that popular doesn't mean that it's not present there in the teachings of our tradition, and somehow they should be brought to their place of dignity. No? For example, just to give you a few examples, Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita will say, "From all secret things I am silence." So he identifies himself with silence. I am silence. No. From all secret things I'm silence. In other words, in silence you discover those secret things. Krishna, God will reveal secrets in silence. Silence doesn't mean absolute silence. We treat as silence to hear what we cannot hear otherwise, so to say, right? Silence for me is not so much stop talking, but listen attentively. Because at that we relate silence to, no, it's, you need some inner silence to listen. And there's also one Srimad Bhagavatam in the 7th canto, just to give the quote in case you don't believe me, chapter 15, verse 77. Then it says that Krishna himself say, I am the one who is worshipped by silence. Srimad Bhagavatam, you cannot argue with that one. And then I have here one, I quoted this in Radical Personalism, my second book, and Srila Prabhupada comments, going back to Bhagavad Gita, which is 10:38, where Krishna says, among all secret things, I'm silent. Srila Prabhupada says, among the confidential activities of hearing, thinking, and meditating, silence is most important, because by silence, one can make progress very quickly. So just bringing some evidence from our own tradition about things that sometimes may not be deemed as part of the tradition even. to further bridge these gaps and create these proper universal connections with other mystical schools, no? Silence, love, stillness. Mm. The call for changing our way of seeing things, that's in every mystical proposal, is there's this invitation to basically change your angle of vision, in Srila Siddhar Maharaj's words. What I've heard is that the very first word that Jesus uses in his ministry was the word metanoia, which basically means change your mind. No? Change your mind, which is historically translated as repent. Interestingly, repent. No, it was change your mind. I'm not against repentance, but from which place we use those terms, right? And we have mantra. Mantra basically means change your mind. It means transcend your mind, but transcend doesn't mean reject your mind. Krishna says in the Gita, your mind can be your best friend. There's no need to reject the mind, just change your mind. So again, we have all this parallel, right? Invitation to change our angle of vision, love, silence, stillness, contemplation, presence. Bhagavatam speaks about Shakshitva, which is a state of being. Shakshi in Sanskrit means witness. Shakshitva means like witnesshood. So the state of being a witness, which basically again means presence, listening. Yeah. And thank you, Father Cashin, for your note on the impact and power of the practices and how that may be, may differ for different persons. And that's why in our tradition we also will say there are different angas of bhakti, different limbs or expressions of bhakti, and we have examples of different devotees attaining perfection through different practices of bhakti, which basically means for different people each practice has a different impact. Basically, that's the implication of that. No? And the examples of, I don't know, Parikshit Maharaj attaining perfection by listening. No? I don't think he chanted one single round during his last 7 days. No? Don't be terrified about that. And he attained perfection. So Kadev Goswami attained perfection by kirtan. But kirtan in this case was he speaking the Bhagavatam, which also is an interesting point. Kirtan also means speaking Harikatha, and so on and so forth, right? So again, there's a broad spectrum of possibilities, so we can find our own place in bhakti. We can, I don't say create your own bhakti, but embrace your bhakti in your own way. There's not just one size fits all. This is what it means to be a bhakta, and if you don't fit in this box, sorry, good luck. There's so many ways one can express our heart and love for God. Sorry, yes. Your name, Sarah? Prema, yes.
This just made me think quite a bit about some experiences I've had. So I've grown up, probably had an interfaith life. Started off at a mosque, spiritualist churches or regular churches, and then world faith study. Then, decided on Hare Krishna. But just reflecting on some of the things you talked about, like I feel my journey with God has remained consistent throughout, from childhood through to practicing the tradition of bhakti. And I find that quite interesting because I didn't always have the knowledge of Krishna's form. But when I pray to Krishna, as a youth, or pray to Krishna as an adult, it's still that same relationship. So I just find that quite interesting. Think about it.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, at the end of the day, of course, we are not talking about the different person. If we are talking about Krishna, God in other expressions, no, even if we were not officially affiliated with bhakti at one point in our trajectory, but we had a connection with God. Again, it's not that now I became Gaudiya Vaishnav, so I'm rejecting the God I was praying before my day of initiation. So it's still the same person, right? We are just rediscovering ourselves and him or her, them, however you would like to talk to him about the divine. We're just continue to rediscover the relationship. And I will make the point, even as Gaudiya Vaishnavas, that most of us are, we still, so to say, pray to the same Krishna, but at the same time, the relationship is meant to be ever evolving and always new, like any relationship. No? So Krishna is not always the same person. He's always Krishna, but he's in constant growth and evolution and expansion. So we are invited to do the same, to keep up with the relationship, with any relationship. So I just made that footnote because sometimes I've seen also, I'm not saying your case, but devotees who become somehow like lost in their relationship with God because somehow they have like created an idea of who God is. And as Richard Rohr will say, our ideas about God are not synonymous with God. God is not our ideas about God. We have an idea, but He's way more than that, right? So we have to allow Him, Krishna, to be all that Krishna can be, or who Krishna wants to be for me today. He wants to be someone in a certain way, but am I allowing Him that? Or I'm just keeping Him in my little box of, you, Krishna, are supposed to be like this. You are supposed to reply to my prayers in this way. No? And Krishna is way more than that, right? So that's dynamic and challenging. It may be even scary for some, like, okay, who is Krishna today for me? But that's exciting at the same. That will keep the whole thing, in my opinion at least, alive and meaningful. No? It's always new.
It's a continuous flow. It's not and down means there's nothing. There's no conversion. It's not and down. It's always the same.
Good point.
Same
Yeah.
eternal relationship with God.
Yeah.
You may manifest, as you're saying, differently according to our different aspects of realization.
Yeah.
But it's the same person.
Yeah. Thank you. Yes, Sanatana Dharma is such an important concept, no? Because we're talking about just the eternal function of the soul.
Yeah.
It transcends religious affiliation, so to say, right? And if I officially become initiated in one particular line, that doesn't mean that I'm rejecting everything else. No, it's not to the exclusion of. No.
It's the same person. Everyone is worshiping the same person. Ultimately.
Yeah. Once this analogy came, like I don't know. Rati, sorry to use that you an example. You and Balaram, you're not alone in the example. So Rati Rupa is Balaram's wife. So she knows Balaram primarily as a wife. That's the rasa, the main rasa, so to say. And she loves Balaram. So she loves Balaram, and sometimes in her love for him, she will want to know how other people see the object of her love. So she will go and talk to Balaram's father and mother and co-workers. To give an example, I'm using an example. No? So you will like go through all these other perspectives of how Balaram is seen as a brother, as a son, as a co-worker. It doesn't mean that Rati Rupa will think, oh, maybe I stop being his wife and become a co-worker. Hopefully not. At some days the idea may come, what if we switch races? But my point with this is that getting acquainted with the other perspectives kind of nourishes your own main relationship. It doesn't mean that you cancel the other people's relationship with Balaram, but you have your preferred angle of approach. But you may even take some time to go through the other ones and find some charm and enrich your own love for him. So I see it like something like that in connection to, okay, I feel this affinity for this face of the absolute, this angle of the jewel. But I will take my time to also have a taste of these other angles and appreciate them and even draw so much that can nourish back my own approach. So there's no need to conflict.
All the others in Vrindavan is like that. All the different rasas, Sakya ras, Vatsalya ras, are all nourishing. Madhurya ras. They're not opposing it, or they're not disturbing it in any way. They're actually nourishment.
Yeah.
So if we see like that amongst each other in this world,
Yeah.
that everyone's hanging a vision towards Krishna or God, it can nourish him. We can nourish each other in our own quest for God consciousness.
Yeah.
And it's wonderful.
And even when some so-called opposition happens in the lila, it's just in a way that nourishes the love. So it's not an actual opposition ultimately. It takes the form of, but yeah. Something else you may like to share? We're almost an hour. I don't want to overextend, but we have time if you want to share something else. Balaramji?
Only if nobody else has.
Nobody else has a question. It's all up to you now.
Just going back a little bit to your question on language, and also you referred to the idea of the Advaita Tattva, and how we would translate that as non-dual consciousness. But then my previous experience, if I heard the word non-dual, especially in the Gaudiya circle, my immediate thought would be impersonalism, Mayavada, that sort of thing. So I was wondering if you could just elaborate a little bit on kind of the meaning of non-dual consciousness from a Gaudiya perspective, how we kind of can understand that in a more healthy way.
Thank you. Yes, it's an important topic. So I agree, and then I elaborated on that again. Sorry to refer to my book, but just to make the point that I consider it so important that I made the whole chapter in radical personalism and non-dual thinking. And I agree that sometimes, especially in our tradition, again, words, right? So non-dual, and for us that may set an alarm. Like, what's non-dual? We are not supposed to be non-dual, because non-dual means, again, impersonal, or whatever word you want to use. And we are not impersonal, we are personalists, which means we are non-dual. So what's the conclusion? We are dualistic. Oh, that's another problem. so what we are. So then you realize, okay, I'm thinking in black and white here. Is there a nuanced way to speak about non-duality? And of course there is. So we are a non-dual tradition. Every tradition, every mystical tradition, I will argue, must be non-dual in its foundation, because if not, you cannot talk about it being mystical. So what does it mean, non-dual? Non-dual means that reality is non-dual, Bhagavatam says, right? Let's go for a moment to our tradition. Srimad Bhagavatam, one of the most important verses there. So it's not, again, our own making. Advai Gyan Tattva. Advai means non-dual. Dvai means dual. Advai means non-dual. So, word for Advaita. Advai. Gyan Tattva. Reality is, Gyan here means consciousness, not so much knowledge. So reality is non-dual consciousness. At the very end of the Bhagavatam, Canto 12, chapter 13, verse whatever, almost one of the last verses of the Bhagavatam says, the whole topic of this book has been Advitiyam Vastu, non-dual substance. The Bhagavatam says this book is about that. Again, you have to understand in which sense it refers to non-duality. We are not talking here about absolute, or what we will call radical non-dualism, which may be the proposal of Shankar, or at least how Shankar is understood by most, which at the end is everything is Brahman and everything else is an illusion, including your idea of being a Jiva, your idea of Bhagavan, your idea of love and relationships. That does not exist in the ultimate experience of radical non-duality. And there's a whole conversation, but I will argue probably in that idea where there's nothing but Brahman, there's not even there's no experience, because to have an experience you need someone who is having the experience and something that is being experienced. But if that duality, so to say, is not there is no experience, right? Anyhow, another conversation. So for us, non-duality, of course, again, non-dual means doesn't mean impersonal. Non-dual means whole, integrated, non-divided, unbroken, non-fragmented. Like the whole of reality exists in connection to a common center. We call it Krishna, God. Put it in the, there is a common center. Everything that exists is revolving around that center. Does not exist in isolation. It's not like a separate orbit. That's a separate reality over here. That will be dualistic. Okay, here you have matter, here you have consciousness, here you have this. Nobody has nothing to do with each other. That's not our teaching. So non-dual, of course, to say reality is non-dual to begin with, it started saying ultimate reality. We will say Krishna, we'll say God. By itself, for itself, is not depending on another reality, is self-sufficient and self-contained. And whatever exists is connected to that. So that will be our version of non-duality. That everything that exists integrated with God as the axis, they say. So there's no separateness. Separateness is an illusion. And that's one of the main points of the Bhagavatam. Bhayam duitiya abhiniveshatasya. Bhagavatam says in 11th canto. Fear arises from duitiya, which is the opposite of advai. No? So fear arises from duality, from seeing things disconnected, separated, fragmented, fractured parts and not wholes. No? Scripture indicate reality is whole. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnam Udachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Avashishyate. There's one word you heard a few times there, right? Which is that one, Purna, which means complete, which means whole. So it's indicating God is whole. Whatever emanates from God is whole, complete, indicating non-duality. Everything is integrated. They're not like broken parts and bits floating around, each one divorced from each other and separate. But that's how we view reality and illusion, basically. and that's the reconciliation process we need to engage. That's the yoga we need to engage in, reconciling the dualistic pattern that makes us see each other as members of different groups, families, species, football teams, whatever, you name it. I mean, there's endless list of what makes us different, generally longer than what makes us one, right? So that's one way of saying it, no? Our philosophy, achintya bheda abheda tattva. Sometimes I joke that for many Gaudiya Vaishnavas, we actually follow achintya bheda tattva. We forget the part of that says abheda. Abheda means non-different. So many times we are achintya bheda tattva. We are inconceivably seeing only differences. Bheda. Again, we are so detailed in our tradition, as we're going back to our first question, so much detail, specificity, that it can create diversity. And there is diversity. But if we don't see all that diversity coming from a foundation of oneness, union, non-duality, wholeness, integration, you name it, if you lose that side, all this diversity becomes separateness. Because you can hold all that together because you are not seeing the common root that is sustaining that. So we need to emphasize abhed as much as we need to emphasize bhed. And I will argue that in many cases we have overemphasized bhed. So probably we need to emphasize abhed more than bhed to balance the equation. So abhed means non-difference. There is a place to say Krishna and I are one. Me and the world are one. That's half of the equation. I'm not saying that's the ultimate conclusion, but there's a place to say that. And we should stay with that and not feel the urgency. But also we are different. Yeah, we'll talk about that for a while. But just stay with the oneness part of the equation. It doesn't mean that I'm promoting personalism and at the end everything becomes brown. We are not going there. Let's not allow our triggers to take over. Okay. I am one with Krishna. There's a place to say that. And sorry.
The whole basis of Renovación Bhakti that oneness with Krishna, that samadhi, that oneness of intelligence, oneness of desire. So there's no separation of Krishna desiring and the presence of Vrindavan acting. There is a oneness there in desire and interaction. It's spontaneous.
Yeah.
That's what spontaneous
means.
That prema is the basis of everything. And there's spontaneous action and reaction. We use the word action and reaction, but in the spirit, this is in the material concept. But in the spiritual world, there's no. It is just a flow of prema emanating from all the resonance of Vrindavan and the oneness of loving Krishna and Krishna reciprocating in that love. And Prabhupada also said, with electricity, the energy is one. It can be used to refrigerate, it can be used to heat, it can be used to do so many things. But it's coming from the same energy. So we do emphasize it. And Vishnu Chakravarti, the course states this also, that as Vaishnavas we tend to emphasize the difference, but we can't forget also the oneness that's there. And that oneness is based on love and prayer.
One quote from Prabhupada here, since you mentioned Srila Prabhupada. I begin my chapter on non-dual thinking with this quote. He says, "In the Vedas it is said that only the Lord alone exists, and all others' existences depend on Him. He is the generating reservoir for everyone's existential capacity. He is the supreme truth of all categorical truths." So there is a place to say only the Lord exists, only Brahman exists, only the absolute Brahman. In the sense that we are not entirely separated from that. There is a diversity, individuality, but at the same time there is we cannot entirely separate ourselves from God, because that's when the dualistic framework comes, and that's the source of all problems, basically. To see each other as having nothing to do with each other. So
I know, Maharaj, you like wordplay. The word dual.
Which word?
Dual, non-dual.
Dual.
It actually refers to a fight, like a medieval fight.
Oh, okay, yeah. Oh, yeah. You're... But that's with E, right?
Yes, it is.
I mean, it sounds similar, so still we can make the...
Yeah.
That's a good one. Dual and dual, yeah. It creates confrontation, basically. It puts us on two different us and them. This us and them pattern, and the Vedas say Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. There's only one family. That's what it says. We are only when you start thinking in terms of two families, you're starting to contribute to war. You are becoming a participant in conflict, and conflict starts individually, locally, townly, provincially, nationally, internationally, intergalactically, and we are just threatening the whole cosmos. And it all begins by creating this inner division in our own self. Sometimes we see ourselves with this dualistic framework. We cannot see ourselves like belonging, already part of, already integrated. So many times we just need to heal the root at home first. Yeah. I don't know if that helps, Father. Something else to add, please? Something else before Patrak?
Yes, Balaram Prabhu's question and your answer sparked a question that I had some months ago after a broadcast I watched of yours.
After what, sorry?
One of your broadcasts.
Okay.
From a few months ago. On the question came up about impersonalism.
Okay.
And you said, if I remember correctly, something that was different from what I'd understood from all my life studying Prabhupada.
Sorry for that.
No. I just want to get it clarified. That's all.
Okay.
It was about if the Jiva aspires to go to the Brahma Jyoti and have the merging with the Lord's effulgence, where there's no one else to relate to. There's no relationship there, and yet I think you said there's bliss there. I think you said that. And I'm not necessarily quoting you. This is a question. Maybe you did, maybe you didn't. But I got the impression that it's blissful there. But I wonder about that, because bliss means love, right? That's really what bliss is. It's love. So, and there's no one else there to exchange that love with. I'm wondering how people a soul can experience bliss in the Brahma Jyoti, and also the understanding that I had, and I think it was from my Guru Srila Prabhupada, that eventually the soul in that position comes back because it's not ultimately satisfying. So, and
Okay.
yet,
This is getting interesting now. Finally, we're warming up.
And you had said, I think this was the part, I think you had said or implied, and I may be quoting you wrong, so please forgive me if I am, but I think you said that it is an eternal place where a soul who chooses to, that's an option for them to be eternally. And that raised a question for me.
Very well put, and thank you. It's obvious that it raises a question. Okay, let's go. Another moment of potential controversy for Padmanabha Swami. Krishna protect me. So, regarding, I'll begin with the second part of the question. I get your point that Prabhupada at times indicated or seem to indicate that if you are arrived to, let's say, to the stage of Brahma Jyoti or Brahma Sayuja, as it's technically called, one may fall from there. But there are many other instances in which he says something different. I have a quote here just to share with you. So Prabhupada saying, when there is birth after birth, there's no liberation. In liberation, one either attains the spiritual planets or merges into the existence of the Supreme. In either case, there is no question of rebirth into the material world. So that's Srila Prabhupada, chapter 5, Beyond Birth and Death. Just one quote. There are many. But I know that at times he may have said something different. Again, we won't go into that direction, but he said different things at different times on different topics. No? Nobody falls from Vaikuntha. We fall from Vaikuntha. So again, I harmonize that. Of course, he's addressing different audiences and trying to share a perspective of that particular topic that he feels that will be digestible for that particular person at that time. But that's one thing, and Siddhanta is something different. No? What an acharya may say circumstantially with some particular intention and power, and that's one thing, and that's, if we learn to understand it and appreciate it, it's beautiful in its own way. But one sense that shouldn't replace the teaching. You follow my point?
Yeah.
So we see that Prabhupada say, I give you an example now. He's saying, if you attain Brahma Jyoti, there's no rebirth, which means that's permanent. Which, of course, that's the very definition of the word mukti. No? Mukti means liberation. And one of the 5 muktis, at least in our tradition described in the Bhagavatam, we have the 4 more devotional muktis, if you will, right? Salokya, Samipya, Sarshti, Sarupya. And then we have the 5th one, Sayuja, or Ekatwam, the Bhagavatam also refers to it. So this 5th one, which is not our cup of tea, but it's not our cup of tea, but it's someone else's cup of tea, many people. And the Bhagavatam is considering it in the fivefold, you say, equation of mukti. So it's mukti. And mukti by definition means you cannot fall from there. If you can fall from mukti, you cannot call it mukti. It makes no sense. If you fall from liberation, there's no liberation. Right? And mukti is defined in that way in the Bhagavatam. Muktir hitvanyata arupam swarupena pyabhyashtiti. I won't go into the details of that line, but basically means in mukti means you are beyond all false designations and you're established in your nature as a soul, and plus we have our nature as a soul in its full potential in connection to bhakti. So yeah, I know that not every Gaudiya Vaishnav thinks like I'm thinking. I'm trying to support my thinking with scriptures and what Prabhupada says. I'm not trying here to convince anyone, just in case I'm not that type of person. So even if some of you think, okay, Maharaj, nice arguments, but I still have my own views, great. We'll have prasad at midday together, no problem. But I personally think there is a strong case for making that mukti is permanent in any form. And of course, on top of that, you can say if you attain Brahman, and eventually we'll say, okay, you fall from that. What can make you fall from Brahman? Brahman is beyond the gunas. Brahman is one of the three aspects of the absolute. There's no Maya there. So what can make you fall? If you are beyond the gunas. Beyond the gunas is beyond. Anyhow, there are different ways to think about that. That was my point, right? But I was just sharing to begin with that Prabhupada himself agrees with that. Those at times he may have said something else. Right? In the same way that in my opinion, but the Siddhanta is that nobody falls from Vaikuntha. And Prabhupada says in the purport of the 7th canto of the Bhagavatam, where the topic is brought, the only topic in the whole Bhagavatam where the topic is brought is Jai and Vijay, quote unquote, falling from Vaikuntha, which we know is a lila, very particular case. And at one point, Yudhishthira Maharaj is asking Narad Muni, because this is the meta narrative inside the main narrative. And Narad Muni is saying, okay, and Jai and Vijay fell from Vaikuntha. And then Yudhishthira Maharaj comes with a question, how can someone ever possibly fall from Vaikuntha? And in the purport to that verse, which is the main place in the whole Bhagavatam where the topic comes, in the purport, Prabhupada says, it is a fact that nobody falls from Vaikuntha. No? So he said that, and that's in accordance with the Siddhanta as exposed by Jiva Goswami in the Bhagavad Sandarbha. There are many chapters he writes about how nobody falls from Vaikuntha. And at times he says something else. And that we have to understand in a certain way. But considering what's the Siddhanta, Rupa Goswami says in Lagu Bhagavatamrita, when we find two apparently contradictory statements, whether in the scripture, whether made by a teacher, we shouldn't cherry pick the one we like the most, but we should try to harmonize them. If one is a proper Siddhanta and something else seems to oppose that, okay, how to understand that? Which was the context in which that was said? I mean, it's messy business. No, it takes time. You have to really enter into that thing and consider more. Maybe in some cases, de-absolutize some of the things that the teachers say. De-absolutize in the sense that not necessarily everything they say has to be taken as absolute revelation, but some cases were an adjustment relative to time, place, and circumstance, right? Like the famous example, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur mispronouncing a word in a lecture, and some of his more absolutizing devotees say, from now on the dictionary has to change. Because Gurudev has revealed the real way to pronounce that word. Yeah? And Srila Siddhar Maharaj was there and say, no, guys, that's not the idea. We just need to correct the mispronunciation. Gurudev is not becoming anything less but mispronouncing a word. Actually, we are given the chance of offering him seva by editing that word. So that's it, no harm. We are engaging in seva, service opportunity.
Also, our Gurudev also said that one enters into a man, that's eternal.
Oh, did it?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. But my way of understanding that is that maybe, I'm trying to think of the name of I read the biography of one yogi years ago, and he was attaining Brahmananda, he was attaining merging with Brahman and coming down from it. But it wasn't permanently established there. So my understanding has always been that someone may be in that position where one is experiencing Brahman, but then he's not permanently established in the Brahman, and he still has material desires within the heart. It's still that manifestation of desire for activity, for interaction, is still like in a seed form within his heart, right? And then it will manifest and he'll fall from the mind like that. I know that's how I reconcile that in my mind, but I could be completely wrong.
No, and that's a way to connect with the verse Aruhya Krichena Parampadam. That there's one verse in the bottom which seems to indicate that someone that attains Brahman falls, but that verse is saying Bimukta Manina. So Bimukta Manina means those who consider themselves to be liberated. So that verse is not actually referring to those who attained mukti, but who are practicing, as you are saying, like trying to get to that realization, but still they are not there, and they may fall from that realization due to some whatever aparad or whatever the case. But sometimes that verse has been read as implying this in the 10th canto. If you get there, you fall. But the different commentators and the words in itself indicates not so much someone who has attained what's called sometimes videha mukti, which means you leave this body and you merge into Brahman, but a certain level of advancement in the path to mukti. But still you are not there. You are bimukta manina. You think of yourself as liberated, but you are not there yet. That happens usually. We might think, oh, I think I'm beyond such and such. And then like, okay, let's see.
Sometimes we think, oh, I'm a devotee.
Yeah. So don't say too loudly. The echo will return as, okay. In relation to your question on ananda and bliss in connection to love, I wouldn't necessarily make a full parallel between bliss and love. Of course, in love there is bliss, but I will speak that on the other direction. There are forms of bliss we do not necessarily attain love, and at least not love in the usual way we think it. No? Because different teachers have explained in different ways. So some will say, okay, that's a long conversation. In our forms of mukti, or our tradition even don't speak about mukti. Now we'll talk about prem, and prem doesn't care for mukti, moksha laguta krit, right? But anyhow, in our tradition or in other traditions, we speak about mukti, devotional mukti. We speak about love, about service. So then comes, but what about Brahma Sayuja? There doesn't seem to be love of service, but you are residing eternally in God, because Brahman is God. So in one sense, that's a form of service. And you could say that's a form of love. On some level, if you want to use that word. Again, these are words, right? We are talking about entering Brahman, which is beyond words. There are many statements in the scripture that is like, words go there and return. No, like implying you try to say something here about there, and the words go there and they return. Like, sorry, not enough. It's beyond words. So we are trying to say words, but the scriptures speak about Brahmananda, no, the Ananda of Brahman, Premananda, different types of Ananda. Jiva Goswami speaks in Priti Sandarbha, Swarup Shakti Ananda, specific Swarupananda, many specificities, a whole world of Ananda, right? There's a whole world of Ananda, but Brahman is part of the equation because it's eternity. No? It's eternity. So it I say it in this way, joking, it cannot be that bad. Although, and I know in our tradition sometimes there has been strong words criticizing that realization, but I will argue, and that's my personal take. I'm not personally so much into, okay, let's make a war against those who want to go to Brahman and show them how inferior they are and show them that they will fall, and let's make them fall from that place if they are there. For me, it's like somehow let's make some conspiracy to make everyone who is in Brahman. I will say, first of all, again, Brahman, Bhagavatam say, Brahmeti, Paramadmeti, Bhagavaniti, Shabditi. Brahman is one of these three aspects of the Absolute. We cannot edit that verse. You cannot say no, that's Brahm. That's just Paramatma Bhagavan. I don't like Brahman. Brahman is there. So, and some people feel that affinity for particular samskars they have received, whatever, and there is a place for them in eternity. So how can that be bad? If that's something so horrible, so to say, or bad, how can you have that eternally over there, right? So that's an interesting point, because we may not agree with them that that's our cup of tea, but there's a place for that in eternity. Like it's on another level, on another, not level, but perspective, a Sri Vaishnava, someone who worships Lakshmi Narayan. If they are here, they will say, as we were talking yesterday, for me, Narayan is the source of Krishna. And we will be like, for us, Krishna is the source of Narayan. And he will say, but for me, Narayan is the source. And I have this scriptural truth. And they will go to Vaikuntha thinking like that. It's not that they are wrong. If they will be wrong, they cannot go to the spiritual world forever. So that's very challenging. That invites us to be accommodating, right? Not just thinking, like recently someone was asking, Maharaj, so everyone, even in Brahman and Vaikuntha, eventually has to end in Golok Vrindavan, right? I was like, no, wait. That's not our idea. That's pretty sectarian. Everyone eventually becomes, someone asked me, like, I don't know if some Christian saints do eventually reach Golok Vrindavan. Like, no. Don't force them into being a gopi and a gopa. They're fine where they are. They're perfectly satisfied there. No? That's a teaching. Chaitanya Charitamrita says that. Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami says, every devotee thinks that their relationship with their Lord is the best, and everyone is correct. So it's not about convincing everyone that ours is the only or best. It's
Says everything is better than everything.
Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah. So yeah, there is some Ananda there.
So when we refer to Satchit Ananda,
Mhm.
it's referring to that world of Ananda that you described.
I mean, the term Satchitananda is very broad. It can be applied in so many directions, right? It can be applied to what you just said. It can be applied to the Jiva. It can be applied to Bhagavan. No, there are different ways to refer to Satchitananda. Yeah, but one of those is the ones you mentioned.
Another bliss from the material world. Interaction with the material energy. To speak with the spiritual.
Atrak, you raised your hand.
Yeah, but I think I might ask it another time. I think
We have 10 minutes. I was given permission to open my mouth till 12 p.m. So it's 10 to 12. If it's okay for me to say something till that time, yeah, we can
So
close.
listening to you and Father Keshem over the last few days, how to approach basically spirituality and make progress. Like, it seems to me that your conclusion was you had two different approaches. One was to really immerse yourself in particular teachings and go as deep as you can. And the other one is to broaden your approach and also look to your left and right to other spiritual ways of schools of thinking. Now, I guess ideally you have a healthy balance of the two of them. And as a person being interested in spirituality and hopefully progressing, what would be signs of that there isn't a healthy balance between the two of them? What signs did you encounter, for example, in your travels?
Can I ask Father Cashin to answer in part?
Please.
In part. We are doing this together.
Please, both, yeah.
Yeah.
Those two approaches are not mutually exclusive, but sometimes they'll do a dance of a predominance of, let's say, depth in one's own tradition and then a width in the discovery of other traditions. I think that they're both vital. And this might sound anti-inclusivist, but hear me out. I think that if you had to choose one over the other, especially in beginning stages, you should choose depth in your own.
Yeah.
Not to the absolute exclusion of the width. So the width would come in the simple recognition that other people, other ways, and other paths have their place. But for me, this is my love and my Lord, and I want to know him and love him or her as best as I can. There's no quantitative adjudication of when you have arrived, because we don't arrive. Every one of our traditions are plunging into the infinite, and so there's no bottom that you hit. But in your own subjective assessment, hopefully in conversation with a guru or a spiritual father or spiritual guide that can help you to see what you can't see from your own interior life, you might reach a point where you think, I am sufficiently rooted such that I can open up the Dhammapada or the Tao Te Ching or the Christian Gospels and not lose my bearings. Rather, I would gain a greater support that could turn me back to the treasures of my own tradition and see them anew.
And what would be sense if I don't have that, or if I don't make that switch, so to speak, at the right time?
Well, first of all, we have to remember that most saints that we love and revere never made the switch to both. Most saints went so deep into their own tradition and found total sufficiency so that they didn't necessarily have any knowledge of other traditions. So we don't want to take that as the new paradigm that everybody has to fulfill. At the same time, most saints, and by most saints I just mean historically, in all the books and the annals of every religious tradition, they also didn't have the globalized society that we live in. So there was lack of information and lack of awareness by virtue of the fact that they lived in the time and the place that they lived. So I think that's important to remember. Signs of what I would call red flags in the spiritual life are the same kinds of red flags that exist in sociological life, psychological life, and other forms of intellectual life, which is somehow, at least implicitly thinking my way is the only way. It could be developing anger, defense mechanisms, reactions against other people who don't think like you. And so anything that brings about a contraction rather than an expansion is at least something to inquire into. It might turn out that it's not as serious as you think. It might turn out that it's an indication that you need to open your heart or your mind just a little more, but without losing who you are. Yeah.
He has such a gift for conciseness. I envy you so much. What I can say in 2 hours, Father says in 5 minutes, and way better than what I could say. So thank you. So, yeah, I totally agree. I like to read just 2 sentences of what I wrote here, because it's basically what you have just said. Like to reaffirm the same principle. So I say, before having a dialogue with other traditions, interfaith, I'm talking in that context, we need to have first a dialogue with our own tradition, intra-faith. That means we have to understand our tradition properly. We do this to avoid becoming confused when we speak with others. And we do it to avoid seeing other traditions and ours in a dualistic way. We find our common essence in all of them while being open and respectful. Anyhow, it continues, but I make that same point. First, I will recommend go deep into your own tradition, and gradually you, even if it may sound sectarian, no, you need those boundaries in the beginning. Srila Prabhupada gave this nice example, very illustrative of the beginning of your spiritual journey in your tradition is like putting a seed on the ground and you have the first bud coming, but it's very fragile. So very easily it can be like affected by winds or uprooted by some animal or who knows what. So you have to build a fence around. No? So the fence are the boundaries. Okay, I concentrate in my tradition. I don't see what's outside of the fence. But that helps the bud to grow upward and downward, no? Being rooted and being grown upward to the point that when you are growing upward enough, you start to see what lies beyond the fence. No? So the time that you start to see beyond the fence is the time that you have been grown equally down. So are you grounded enough in your tradition that you can deal with the diversity that exists outside of the fence and not only not be disturbed by that, but be nourished by that. You can incorporate that. Right? So I like that example. It's very illustrative of But before that period, maybe you need just to, again, be drenched in your own tradition, have sufficient ground. And part of the teaching of the tradition should be, as Father was saying, we are not the only ones, our God is not the only one, and so on and so forth. I mean, to speak about what Gaudiya Vaishnavism is about, in big part, is to speak about the universality and commonality and relationality and connection with everything and everyone, including other traditions. That's part of Gaudiya Vaishnavism. So, yeah. Does it help? And I totally agree with the symptoms, the red flags that, of course, that Father is saying, no? The intolerance to diversity, or to, yeah, people thinking differently. Sometimes even that happens in one's own group. What to speak of other traditions? So in the beginning, it's just not only your tradition, but your group in your tradition. You cannot even go to other versions of the same tradition, because still you cannot manage them using a different word, or dressing in a different way, or singing a different kirtan, or using a different tune for the same kirtan. Yeah, at the beginning you can be immune to all forms of diversity, so to say. It has to be in this way, and gradually, hopefully, we develop our hosting capacity to embrace diversity in our own tradition, beyond our own tradition, and so on and so forth. Right? Because sometimes, as we talked the other day, we may also have I saw that a few times, members of my tradition engaging in interfaith dialogue with other traditions, but they are not able to get along with members of their own tradition. They cannot, how to say, process the diversity found in their own school, so they go to other schools which are overtly more different, and they deal with that. But if you are not dealing with the diversity at home, for me, how you deal with the other diversities from a probably superficial, if not evasive, escapist. Yeah, that also happens. Right? I'm not against interfaith dialogue, of course, but let's put the room in order at home first. So to say. Yeah, sorry, Pram. Yes, I have something.
Sometimes I've found that that association with people from other sampradaya or other branches of Sanatana are easier because there's less judgment. Whereas when you're in a closer group with some specific differences, it seems like it's easier to judge and find those, pick out those faults or differences. Whereas when it's so separate and it's like a different sampradaya, there's just appreciation.
And if there is some conflict, you just move and that's it. But if you have a problem at home, it's more complicated, right? Like if you have, even at home, moving your example to, you live with your, I don't know, your parents and sister, you have a problem with them, it's more complicated than you have a problem with the neighbor that, okay, I have a neighbor, we fought, I don't talk to him anymore, that's it. But at home, that's more entangled, that's more nuanced, there's so much. So in relation to what you are mentioning, no?
Yeah, it just feels like sometimes when people can see the differences and appreciate who you are and what you do without, many more strings to it, without, underlying feelings. So, I have many Sri Vaishnava friends, and it's just, everyone just seems to love them, each other for who they are.
That's the point, yeah.
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 I just think,
and that's a
Christian churches, there could be a lot of conflict, but you would think, oh, why can't there just be peace amongst, that brotherhood or sisterhood with, Christ and God?
Yep.
But for some reason or other, the more close they are, the easier it is for conflict. And I found the same.
Yeah, and I would say, yeah. In my opinion, in my experience, I would say, big reason why I wrote this book is all the things you are saying. We are radical personalism. Our tradition is radically personal, but many times how we relate to one another is radically impersonal. And we do not treat each other for who we are, but just put us in boxes and labels. Oh, you are from this. We take for granted. Okay, you are Gaudiya Vaishnav. You belong to that group. Oh, who is your guru? Okay, you are in that box. Who is your guru? Okay, you are in that box. So we take for granted people and we depersonalize them by labeling them, putting them in boxes and taking them for granted. Because I know you. You are Gaudiya Vaishnav. And that's impersonalism. I'm depriving you and me from a personal experience of the unique being that you are. And again, as you say, it's easier sometimes to go to more unknown, unexplored groups or territories, and we can find more the uniqueness. And when we go back home, it's like, oh yeah, I know what these Gaudiya Vaishnavas are about. I'm one of them. Yeah. And we take for granted the whole thing, and that's reductionistic to the core, and that's impersonal, literally. So we need to somehow rediscover our role in the tradition and our way of relating each other, emphasizing not so much your affiliation, your guru, your school, your tradition, but who you are as a person. Relate to each other as people, as individuals. As much as we don't do that, we are promoting impersonalism. As much as we criticize it, and that creates this like dissonance. No, like we are very vocal about impersonalism, this, impersonalism, that, but then what happens at home? So, okay, we are personalists. We have to walk the talk in all its nuance and implications. Not only saying our God is the supreme personality of Godhead. Fine, great. What about the supreme personality of yourself? What about everyone else's personality in its supreme form? How much we are fostering that in our relationships. So, yeah, we have some homework to do as a community. And I'm sure this happens everywhere. It's not limited to Gaudiya Vaishnavism. The grass seems greener on the other side of the fence always. So I think it's healthy also to universalize this these issues and not just, oh, it's only in our tradition happening. We are so bad. We have such, no, it's certainly happening everywhere. So we are universalizing so we can create more sense of connectedness and brotherhood and sisterhood in navigating all these struggles, even as traditions. This old stuff is common to human psyche, basically. Okay, I don't want to overextend. And we are almost 2 hours. So tomorrow today in the evening, we have a meeting with Father Cashin on universal spirituality. So somehow, hopefully, it's like an overflowing of today's gathering in the morning, which somehow went a lot in those directions. At 7 p.m. Yeah. Tomorrow morning, we have one more meeting here, same place, same time. Okay. Thanks so much to all for your presence.
Would it be possible to take a group picture?
Yes, we'll take a picture. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ki jai, Sri Sadhu Sangha ki jai, Gaur Premanand Hari Bol, Vancha Kalpataru Vishani Parsindhubhyai Bachavati Tanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo, Nanta Koti Vaishnavrinda ki jai.